Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me on one, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. You can pick up these links, episode details, and more. And we're going to do a little bit of a recap episode, maybe something, a little bit of a discussion point around what I think I'm going to do for the next little bit. We're going to continue with the conversational interviews. I think those make sense. I really enjoy doing them, getting the opportunity to talk with folks. But I wanted something to have kind of in this period during the summer where things lull a little bit. There's no shortage of new product introductions into the market, but folks are probably gearing up for the September, October, November, December timeframe where a lot of their sales happen. And so we usually see a lull in July and August as those things ramp up. Obviously, we're kind of running up on the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Hopefully I'll be able to attend that again this year and be able to kind of walk through from a participant's perspective what everything looks like. They've got a ton of new offerings of things they can do and some really, really elite experiences. But I don't think that they've gotten into a situation where they have alienated the standard attendee of it, right? They've really just kind of added things on to the top end of the experience. And so looking forward to that. Couple of other things that have happened recently. Maybe let's talk about some new product introductions. I had an opportunity about a month ago, and this is probably right before vacation, to attend a tasting of these two items, and we can put this in closer, but it's not going to help because the lights aren't going to help us here. But anyways, Milam & Green did this really interesting experiment with some distillate where they aged some in Kentucky, some in Texas, just to kind of see the impact. Same amount of time. The proofs came out slightly different as you would expect. The Kentucky proof is a little lower than the Texas proof was, but I could see how you might have fans of both profiles. I really enjoyed the tasting. We'll do some more robust taste notes on this later on. I think I'm mostly done with those. We've kind of taken a little bit of a break for summer as we're doing vacations and kid stuff and all of those wonderful things. Another introduction into the market, and I saw this label maybe a year or more ago and was interested in what was going to happen. And so this is the first non-Maker's Mark branded Maker's Mark product that's ever entered the marketplace. It is an American wheat whiskey from them, brought out in 2025. They're doing some innovation while staying in their wheelhouse. I don't really know how you do that. I mean, if you follow the evolution from the standard Maker's Mark through the Maker's 46, through the barrel stave introductions, into the cellar aged, into the higher proof offerings, they've really found a way to squeeze as much as they possibly can out of their standard offerings. Now, this one is obviously not a standard offering, and everything I understand that this is, maybe gonna be a continual release, maybe not, maybe an LE for them, but this is like a estate wheat grown on farm. By chance of my career, had an opportunity to visit with some of the farmers, one of the farming families specifically, that provides a bulk of their wheat that is not on their property, which was a super fun introduction. And then we obviously hopped over to Maker's Mark for a tour there. And so seeing what kind of came out of that, we'll do some tasting notes on that later on as well. Have some thoughts, I think, and we can go ahead and kind of jump to the end of that. I'm glad they did it. I think it's an interesting release. I don't know that it is worth any secondary that exists. I think it is absolutely worth the retail on it. But I was expecting something different maybe, and I don't think it's different enough from their standard flavor profile. I mean, you still get the DNA of Maker's Mark in it. Now, one other thing, one other brand product introduction thing, and I've had these bottles for a while, and so Macaulay, I'm really, really sorry. But back in the spring-ish time frame, they sent out, Dark Arts Whiskey House sent out these Mizunara stave finished offerings, and one is from Bourbon Junkies and one is from It's Bourbon Night, and the intent was for you to compare kind of how they blended those two things together and see kind of which one you preferred. And I have finished the tasting notes on this. I haven't released them. We'll see whenever I get those actually published, but what I will say is that I think both are absolutely worth it. This is not the first time that those two channels have kind of gone up against each other. If we get in the Wayback Machine and go back to one of the whiskey weekends, they did a was it 3-chord maybe? They did a blend live. It was a group of 4 against a group of 4, and the Junkies were on one side and It's Bourbon Night was on the other. There were other people obviously as a part of their blending groups, and they created 2 different things that you were then subsequently able to purchase and kind of guess what you thought there. Now, blending is one of those games that maybe isn't best reserved for doing it in a 10-minute period, right? Or a 30-minute period, or even an hour period. What I think this ultimately came out is a really phenomenal couple of bottles. And what Macaulay is doing with barrel finishing is unique enough to give it some specific attention. Really glad he's got what's going on. They have also, subsequent to that, opened up their physical location that you can actually go. They've got a tasting site in the Lexington area. Really, really good opportunity for you to go and see what they've got going on. And he's added Sarah, formerly of It's Bourbon Night, as a part of what they've got going on there. I think she's actually running the on-site there. So really kind of a few interesting releases, and I don't see anything else that I have here. Well, I'll take that back. My friends at Larrikin, Greg and the group over there, and I think they've actually snatched up one of the former employees of Casey Jones that was a part of the single barrel pick that I did last year with them. Was it last year or the year before? I don't remember when that was. Anyways, they sent over a couple of samples, and so they've got their small batch, which I've had a number of times, but they've also got this bourbon cream, and I haven't put it in anything yet, but I've been working on kind of what kind of a cocktail I want to put this in, because bourbon cream is one of those things that usually people see in the wintertime. You're going to add it into your coffee, or you're going to, kind of put it alongside a hot beverage, and hot beverages aren't the best in the middle of July, but I think that there's probably a really great opportunity for maybe like a Coke float or root beer float type thing, but using bourbon cream instead of ice cream in it, and kind of seeing how that turns out. Haven't gotten to do that yet because I don't know, I've just been taking some time, just doing whatever I want to do. We have a few podcasts scheduled, hopefully, that are not going to be directly bourbon or whiskey related. They're going to be sort of adjacent. I've been trying to find some more interesting conversations to have. A lot of my friends who are running podcasts are doing a lot of the same types of episodes, and no shade there. Obviously, they're doing what they need to do to continue putting out content. But since I'm not trying to generate any real growth on this platform, which is contrary to what most people are doing, I'm not trying to do that, so I just kind of record what I want to when I want to, and that seems to work out. And luckily, I have a few really solid PR companies that work with me that sort of understand the ethos of what I'm trying to do, and they make sure and send the right kind of opportunities my way. So awesome. Thanks, guys, for that. I've had the opportunity to be on some tastings with the Bourbon's Lens guys. There may be something coming out is more of a community thing around that. So be looking out for that if you get an opportunity to. What else? Nick at Found North. Nick at Found North just did another one of their limited releases, another Helldiver, which from all accounts that I've received from some of my friends who received media samples on that was one of the best whiskeys that they've had in 2025. Hopefully I'll be able to sneak a sample of that later on from somebody who picked up a bottle. I'd like to have it kind of as a year-end value, but I don't know that I'm going to do any like best whiskeys of the year, because usually those things are recapping things that have already kind of gone by the wayside. You don't have access to them anymore. Is it useful to talk about it if you don't have access to it? Or is it just really bottle flexing? I don't know. Or is it just an opportunity to try to fill your content? Because at the end of the day, you got to make sure you put out an episode every single week, or the algorithm doesn't like you. Who cares about the algorithm? All right. So one last thing, we're going to kind of roll into maybe a mini series, maybe a series that we're gonna kind of run through, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And I want to give a whole lot of credit here, because the series that I'm getting ready to do, that'll be kind of interspersed amongst interviews as they come available and other opportunities, has really been made able by community friends, specifically David from Whiskey Ring Podcast, and Don Nishida, just a really, really good friend of mine, and a handful of other folks. I think I've gotten some samples from a friend in Illinois, from Tony, from Patrick, from a handful of folks. And so I've been kind of figuring out what I want to do here, right? So let's just picture this. I'm sitting at my desk right now, and I am surrounded by desk whiskey, and there's whiskey behind me and all of these things. But right over here to the right-hand side, I have lots and lots of small sample bottles, and those bottles have been kind of set off to the side, carefully labeled for a long time. And they have a lot of different distillery names on them, and each one of them represents a moment, right? At least it does for me. It represents a moment where a friend said, you should try this, or this reminds me of a thing, or this is something that's really, really interesting. It's not just what's in the bottle. It's really about how it made them feel and how it made them think that I should try this as well. And this is sort of how I built out what we're going to do, a series of episodes here, and I'm going to call it, at least for now, this is the a Scotch whiskey discovery series. And I didn't start this with a plan to have all of these little sample bottles and all of these things. It's just sort of things that happen, right? Human impulse to share things. Friends have sent this stuff over time. They've tasted it. They get excited about it. They had it in their collection. Maybe they just needed to empty out a bottle so they could clear up some space to put a new bottle on the shelf. But the thing that kind of struck me about all of it was it's not just the whiskey, but like the ecosystem that built it, the generosity of it. The way that people have held on to things because they're genuinely excited about sharing these things with other friends. There's the type of people who save bottles so they can go to a bottle share, and they can, have those flexing moments where they can tell somebody, oh, look at all this stuff that I know about whiskey, or look at these really, really impressive bottles I have. And then there's the friends who send you home with a sample or send a sample to you, and they're not really doing it in a public eye, right? They're just saying, hey, try this. And this is the conversation that happens when someone sends this to me, something that I've never had before. And sometimes there's a note saying, hey, you should do it in this order. And sometimes it's just, hey, give this a shot. And I realized that I had sort of accidentally assembled what I think is relatively special. It's not just a collection of samples, but it's a window into how whiskey actually gets discovered and appreciated in the real world. Sometimes it's through marketing or reviews, but at least in my circles, a lot of the times it's really about human connection and shared curiosity. And that's what kind of most of my interviews are about, is kind of sparking that curiosity, sparking that conversation as much as possible, because, and I've said it a lot of times on these episodes, you're really you're going to sell the first bottle with marketing, but you're going to sell the second bottle with relationship or quality, right? Those, and maybe both, if you're really, really lucky. And that's what this series is really about. We're hopefully going to taste, and we is me, there's really no one else to this, right? But I'm going to taste my way through over 35 expressions, and most all of them, and we're not going to say most, all of them are samples that friends have shared over time. And we're going to explore not just what makes them special, but why someone might have cared enough to pass this along, because that's how a lot of us are discovering great whiskey. It's through enthusiasm of people we trust. This is why we watch the same tasting videos over and over again, or we have that same reliable source that likes things that you like. And so then you're going to follow up and be like, I know if I've got X number of dollars to spend, I can be smart with it because I know somebody who has an opportunity to try these things. So that's what we're going to go after in this particular series. Now, here's what I've learned after years of tasting and talking to distillers and watching people's faces light up when they discover a whiskey that it speaks to them or is special to them. And it's really not about alcohol. It's about connection. It's about connection to a place, to a tradition, to the human drive to make, simple ingredients transform into something that captures the essence of where it's made, that terroir conversation, or the indomitable spirit of humankind to try to toil something out of the earth. But there's also this other thing that's happening in whiskey right now, at least in the whiskey world, that makes this a perfect time for this conversation for me. There's a tension, a really beautiful tension between tradition and innovation. Ancient distilleries are doing experimentation with new techniques while new producers are rediscovering forgotten methods. And this is happening in North America, in the United States, in Kentucky, in Indiana. This is happening in Scotland, in England. There's a whole host of kind of a resurgence of historical thinking, but applying new technology and thoughts to it. It's very, very disruptive. And we're seeing kind of this rise of independent bottlers in the United States. And this is something that's existed in the Scotch whiskey world for a long, long time. And they're really true curators. They find gems that even the distilleries themselves either overlook or it doesn't match the flavor profile they're going after. A lot of these big historic brands, they have kind of a DNA of taste that has to exist. And if they find things that are sort of outside that can be phenomenal, they don't really have a way to bring that to market. And that's where our friends and independent bottlers really kind of bring that forward. And this is what excites me the most about it all. There's this huge community around whiskey, and it is changing. And there are gatekeepers and people who want to make it about prestige and exclusivity. But increasingly, we're having conversations and we're meeting people who approach whiskey with real curiosity. At least I'm seeing less of the troll-like behavior and more of people who want to understand not just what they're tasting, but why it matters, and the people who make it, and have a deeper connection with the things that they're going to spend their money on. And that's sort of the case with luxury goods. The kind of the higher you go up, the more of a personal relationship you want to have with the person that you're purchasing it from. And this series exists because I believe that everyone should have access to these stories and the flavors, and regardless of budget and background, some of the most memorable whiskeys that I've ever tried are under that $30 mark, right? There's a lot of that. And some of the most passionate conversations I've had are with people who are trying whiskey for the first time. It's really fun to lead a tasting of an inexperienced whiskey drinker because they're getting to experience that first time round that we're all sort of chasing, right? Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. And we're going to taste our way over the different expressions. And they're, like I said, they're all samples that friends have shared, but we're going to really explore how some of us, or how a lot of us, are starting to actually discover great whiskeys through our friends. Now, how we're going to do this together, rather than approaching this like a textbook or a tasting course, right? We're going to follow curiosity, sort of the way my ADHD brain works sometimes, through a series of episodes that will pop up throughout the regular Embellish podcast offerings. And, it'll be things like what makes Islay whiskey taste like they've been kissed by ocean spray and peat smoke. Right. And I know that's a little bit more probably floral of language than what I might historically use, but that's a really strong sentiment amongst Islay fans. And then there are other questions like, how do independent bottlers find casks that even original distilleries missed or passed on? And why do some whiskeys that cost hundreds of dollars leave you cold, while others under $50 sort of stop you in your tracks, right? And we'll explore Scotland's 5 whiskey regions. And we've done this at a much lower level, but, we'll take an episode for each region maybe. And not in a way necessarily that we've done in the past. And instead of just cataloging characteristics, maybe we'll talk about the geography, the climate, the human creativity that comes together to create the flavors that are maybe impossible to replicate elsewhere. We can talk about Speyside's elegant heartland and precision meeting artistry. We can explore maybe Highland's diverse landscapes, from valleys to mountains. We can talk about Islay's peat-soaked shores and the ocean spray that I kind of already mentioned. But we're also going to discuss people who are reshaping how we think about whiskey, the independent bottlers who serve as some of whiskey's most passionate curators. We'll explore how groups like Scotch Malt Whisky Society are democratizing access to exceptional casks. We can discover companies like Compass Box, who elevated blending from a commercial necessity to an art form. And in each episode, we'll build on what we've learned while introducing new ideas, new flavors, new perspectives. And by the time we've kind of worked through all of these samples, hopefully you'll have something more valuable than a collection of tasting notes. You'll have developed your own relationship with Scotch, your own ability to recognize quality and character, and most importantly, the confidence in your palate, right? And that's the thing that is shaky for a lot of newcomers to whiskey, because they hear people give out tasting notes and they're like, there's no way in hell that you actually taste that particular flavor in there. And likely, no, you don't taste that exact flavor. We're really running off of memory receptors, and we're saying this flavor reminds me of that thing. But whiskey nerds often get really confident in our notes and be like, oh, this is a Reese's peanut butter cup. And you don't see it. You don't understand it, because that's not what a Reese's peanut butter cup tastes like to you. And that's okay, right? We're all sort of different. But we want to make sure everybody feels confident in saying what they do. And this is the beautiful thing about this approach. You're not going to have to buy anything to get value from this series, hopefully. I'm trying to do what whiskey friends do naturally, and that is share discoveries that my friends shared with me and talk about why they matter, what makes them valuable in a conversational piece. And if you want to taste along, that's great. Some of it might be impossible, and some of it will be accessible, right? Because there's this really, really broad set of samples that are over here, and honestly, maybe I'm just trying to get some shelf space back as well. We're really trying to move beyond just listening and trying to give like a real sense of how flavors work and why people might be excited about them. So pay attention to the stories behind each sample as we kind of go through it. Why did someone choose to share this particular whiskey, and what excited them about it? These things often kind of tell you more about a whiskey's character than any technical description can, right? If a human being gets excited and wants to share it, it means more than a hang tag on a shelf in a liquor store. Right. And we're trying to move beyond the prestige of the label. And if you were to put it in a brown paper bag, what makes this interesting, right? What makes this valuable to a person? If you have friends who enjoy whiskey or who are curious about it, share this journey with them. Maybe, if we're talking about Scotch specifically, right? Because we've been talking about bourbon a lot recently. Maybe you can even start your own sample trading network. You should never send it through the mail, because that is illegal, and that would be the wrong way to share things. You might have to use other couriers, as my friends over at Chill Filtered often say. But Some of my most memorable whiskey experiences have come from conversations with people who brought a completely different perspective on the same set of liquid. You may taste leather. I may taste tobacco. Let's talk about why and where did you get that leather from and where did I get that tobacco from? Because my tobacco may not be your tobacco. You know, I grew up in Western Kentucky where we do dark fired tobacco. And so we may have worked in tobacco and hung tobacco and pulled tobacco down from the barns whenever it was time to send them off for stripping and sale at that point. Right. And so those are all very distinctly different smells, and those smells become flavors and flavors become memories. Right. And sometimes you get a friend who says, you know, I get floral notes here, and you're like, I don't know how in the hell you got floral notes from this when all I smell is grain alcohol, right? Having those conversations with each other, you're not necessarily just getting to know the alcohol, you're getting to know your friend. You're getting a story from their past. And that's, we could all drink $5 whiskey as long as we can share those kind of stories. It'll be far more fulfilling than anything else. And the other thing, like an important part of this is hopefully we approach each of these tastings with and stories with curiosity, something more than judgment, right? Because here in Kentucky, we're going to have a lot of judgment towards whiskey from other countries because we have a very strong feeling that bourbon is king and everything else should sit by the side. And that's not true, right? Because bourbon is king, but so is rye, and so is American single malt, and so is wheat whiskey, and so is a handful of other things. And the rest of the world has the same mentality. And so hopefully we sort of break those habits, at least in my own mind. And some of the whiskeys will immediately click with people's palate, right? You taste it in the first time, you're like, this is absolutely it, right? Because it's taken me a while to warm up to the flavor of peat, and I can get through it now, but that's just it. I want to move past getting through it and actually taste it. Those things might challenge you or require you to take some time to appreciate the thing. And both of these are really valuable, right? They'll kind of expand your horizons a touch. So by the end of the series, hopefully you have this genuine appreciation of craftsmanship and heritage and innovation and an understanding of Scottish whiskey culture a little bit. Understand why some bottles command a premium. Some have really, really outstanding value and quality without prestigious names. And the thing is, the thing that makes me the most excited about this particular thing as I kind of drafted up the idea is that we'll join a global community of people who share curiosity about how tradition and innovation can exist at the same time. How can they live in the same space at the same time, right? Because those things seem contrary to each other, and how geography is going to shape the flavor, and how the dedication of craftspeople creates something that brings joy to millions and millions of people around the world. Hopefully the knowledge will enhance every whiskey experience for the rest of your life, whether it be Scottish whiskey or Irish whiskey or English whiskey or American whiskey for that matter, right? These are all lessons that can kind of cross that exact same thread regardless of culture. Maybe you walk into a whiskey shop with a little more confidence, right? I feel very confident looking at bourbon and American whiskey, and whenever I step to the Scotch aisle, I feel very, very lost. If I step into the tequila aisle, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and rum, is it Captain Morgan? I don't know what to do next, right? And so we want to kind of dispel any of the gatekeeping that might exist there, right? Hopefully you're a participant in this more than just an observer, but if you're just an observer, that's fine too. And you might develop some personal preferences. So here we are. We're ready to explore the flavors and stories that the people have been generous enough to share, right? My friends have shared this with me. And whether you're going to taste along or simply listen, hopefully this series will give you a real sense of how whiskey lovers actually discover and appreciate these expressions through friendship and curiosity and genuine conversation. This is going to be the Scotch Whiskey Discovery series as a part of the Embellish podcast. And let's see what our friends have sent us. All right. Hopefully next week we'll put an episode out that'll walk us through some actual whiskey, and it's not just, 30 minutes of me rambling incoherently. Right. So Thanks for tuning in for this particular episode from the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. You can hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using Embellish Pod. You can give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. And thanks for stopping by today.